So here we are, a week out from the buys, just only thinking, well, one more week of best 22 on field. We'll navigate to best 18. Last correctional trades. Happy days. It should be a pretty easy week to navigate. Let's be honest. That's what you were thinking maybe Friday last week. Then the news. Jason Horne-Francis, hamstring. Jack Macrae spends extra days in WA in hospital, ruled out. Jaden Short, still not yet back. And how many red dot dilemmas do we have to go with? Okay, that sounds a little depressing, but the good news is here at the Coaches Panel on this week's strategy session, we have got a ton of stuff to get through, but it is all designed to help you navigate this very critical week as the last best 22 before 5 weeks of multi-buy rounds, and a bunch of extra trades can be accessible as a result. We will talk about all that and more on this week's strategy session. Joining me here at the Coaches Panel is our fellow panelist, MiniMonk. Hello, mate. How are you? And we're going to find a way to get through this week to help coaches tuning in to make some good decisions, because this week, wow, if things go your way, you are head and shoulders ahead of the pack if you can make it work.
Can we have one of those best 18 weeks back again? I mean, there's going to be some donuts held by some people, I reckon. I honestly think we're in a position, probably not as much in SuperCoach and in Dream Team, but I think in AFL Fantasy, we might be getting close to donut territory with how many relevant players keep dropping out of our teams, you know? You talked about it. Jason Horne-Francis, Jackson Macrae, Jaden Short, Finn Callahan as well. Let alone what we might see from rookies come Thursday night or even Wednesday night with regards to teams with rookies on the fringes of best 22s and best 23s inside of their teams, you know. We had players like Sato Hooley subbed out. We had players like Tom Gross named as the sub again. It's going to get pretty hectic if this is what we keep getting thrown in 2025. But as you said, we're here to try and help you through that challenge and help ourselves through it with a little bit of mental coping, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Look, if you've got the trifecta of Callahan, Macrae, and Horne-Francis, I think almost embracing the pain of I'm probably copping a 0 here is almost necessary. Yeah, the benefit of SuperCoach and Dream Team, and I love it. I've been very vocal about the flex ever since they introduced it with the flex and 22 on field. I love this. I hope AFL Fantasy go down a similar vein for next year, because I think it adds another layer of strategy, another layer of scoring, and a layer of protection that I'm a fan of. Based on ownership, though, as you mentioned, Callahan is horrible, out for 3 to 4 weeks, which really means, much like these other guys, it's the worst time for it to happen. But let's focus on Horne-Francis and Macrae for us a little bit, because if you've only got one of these guys, you're set. But chances are, if you own Horne-Francis, with very few exceptions, you've also got Macrae. So using these two top-end premium forwards, how do we handle these absences, and how do we prioritize which of the two should go if we're doing that, and which of the two should be held? Again, knowing it's very format dependent. And maybe we should start in AFL Fantasy. If you've got both, how do you approach the mechanism of having both a Horne-Francis and a Macrae trade? Because if you've just got one, it's easy. Deal with the one and deal with something else. But if you've got both, what are you going to do?
If you've got both, it's going to be a pretty rough time to have both. Like, it's honestly just not easy. You probably have to consider trading both. Genuinely, pathways, I've seen a lot of teams with an extra midfielder in their, an extra forward in their midfield line. So that might help you with a bit of flexibility. Players like Nick Martin, if you maybe have as well, you could swing from your defensive line to your forward line and allow you to choose where you're wanting to pull that upgrade. But there's genuinely a world where both of these players are just traded out. Now, the interesting part for the two of them is that Jason Horne-Francis is going to lose cash as a result of the 11 in his scoring cycle for the next 5 weeks in AFL Fantasy, and I think it's a 16 or something in SuperCoach, and it'll be in the next 3 weeks. So if you're a non-owner, you're probably just waiting for that time to come down. Jack Macrae played out the game, still able to put up a reasonable score as an 84 and hasn't come down in price. And so if you're trading him out, you're probably saying, in SuperCoach, you're saying, I'm probably not trading back into him. In AFL Fantasy, you're saying, I'm probably not trading back into him until at least the middle or end of the buys, which is likely when he's going to be back, and he'll probably be on some managed minutes. So it might be a bit of a price decrease as a result of that. But it also gives you the flexibility to be able to do a lot with the cash that he does have on his head. I think if you've got those two, I'd probably just prioritize trading the two of them out. We don't really have that many forward rookies that are pumping out good scores anymore. Caden Cleary, matchup's good, but he seems to be coming to an end in his scoring potential. Simpson, if you had got him last week, and congrats to those coaches who did, I think he should be a reasonable rookie from here, but you don't want to be fielding him this week with a Port Adelaide matchup staring at the face. Levi Ashcroft's still been pretty good, but I would struggle to find if there's any coaches out there that really have traded him out or don't have him on field in AFL Fantasy. And that's it, really. Like, I think that it's just at that point where you trade both. You try and find a combination that works for your team. You try and see what DPP links you can open up to try and be able to prioritize the players that you're wanting to get and not be forced to get into two forwards and go from there.
We do want to talk about SuperCoach and Dream Team because I think it's a bit more of a nuanced conversation with the limited trades. And even the fact that you've got that flex position, you are kind of prepared to potentially run 22 on field if you had to, even with poor bench hygiene, which I do want to talk about that with you on the podcast. But is it just as simple in AFL Fantasy as I'll take two top 10 forwards and I'll turn them into two top line options or close to top line options? Or is this also an opportunity to be a bit creative with our cash generation? I know we want to talk about Kitty Coleman later in the podcast, but a player like him, is this the chance to go, I'll make a couple of 100K and drop it the way down to one and go up and the other into, I don't know, a Zach Merritt type this week? Again, it's probably not the great week to get from a break-even perspective, but from a matchup, it might be. Is that a potential way, or are you much more traditional mindset of two top liners in, go get two top liners, don't go to the bottom end and create?
It's a different year. We can't just resort back to tradition and saying this is the way that we would play it. I think we've talked about it. I think it's been beaten to death ad nauseum across every podcast and every social media you look at that we are struggling to get cash into our teams. And players like Kadeem Coleman in AFL Fantasy, when he's coming in at a price tag of 540K, like he's 50K cheaper than Luke Traynor. He's nearly 200K cheaper than Zach Reed in the same line. When you can think about creative cash generation pathways by getting someone like Kitty Coleman in and still being able to get rid of a red dot and still being able to get a premium on the other side of your trades, that's the pathway that allows you to not only improve your team for the long term, but allow you to build the ability to be able to get the premiums that you want later down the line as well. So I think that in a traditional sense, if we were all at, 24.5, 25 million cash in the bank in AFL Fantasy, we'd say, yep, we'll go sideways. I'll move him to a Chad Warner, or I'll move him to a premium mid that I want, like a Tom Green or a Zach Merritt or even a Nick Martin. But we're just not in that type of year. And I think that most coaches have to get creative in order to be able to stay on cadence with everyone else and be able to continue to develop their team to becoming a finished product.
Yeah, it's a good thought. Dream Team and SuperCoach, it's a different conversation though, because not only do you have the extra variable on the field, you've got a finite number of trades. And look, at this time of year, again, it's different with the type of cash cows you may and may not have. You're looking at about 2 to 2.5 trades per premium upgrade on a standard year. And that's to get to the top line options that you really want. So for those that don't own the Bontempelli, the Butters types through the midfields, the Whitfields, the Zorkos, the Martins, again, just picking top line names, let alone if you don't have one of Cherry or Gorn and spending $700,000 in SuperCoach and $1.1 million in Dream Team. Like, it's unattainable price points pretty much to get into one of those guys at this point of the year. What are variables to help us make an informed decision about which we should be trading? Should we be trading both? and how do we make that determination for our unique sides?
Let's start in Dream Team first, because it's a very quick conversation. I think there's a pathway where you can trade both in that format. I think if you start to look at the forwards and you start to look at, who are the top 6 forwards in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team for 2025, I think it's very easy to say that the few that are likely to be up there are Bailey Smith. I'd say an Isaac Rankin has shown that he's probably a top 6 forward. I'd say that Christian Petrarca has shown that he's an top 6 forward. After that, it gets a bit hairy as to really who are these forwards that we're really wanting to hang on to for the entire year. I mean,
Nick Martin's probably there, to be fair.
Oh, yeah, okay. Nick Martin, yeah, okay. I'll give you Nick Martin as well. But, Matthew Kennedy's averaging nearly 100. Luke Jackson, if Sean Darcy, they want to spend a significant time with him just rehabbing through the waffle and get him rid up to fitness, he's averaging 90. He's had a sneaky good year in AFL Fantasy. Chad Warner is averaging 89. Ryan Marriage is quietly going at about 90 since those first couple of weeks where he went 31-74. And his lowest score since round 3 is a 72. That's a sneaky good run for someone that you could ride at F6. There's a world where both JHF and Jackson Macrae aren't top 6 forwards in AFL Fantasy. And I don't think that is being said enough. Jason Horne-Francis, I think people can see it a lot more just because of his instability in scoring and the slower start that he had. But with Jack Macrae, if you take out that 139 that he had against Freo, in his last 7 games, his highest score is a 95. That is questionable for whether he actually is a top 6 forward. And at his price tag in Dream Team, I think there's a lot you can do with that, especially if you can, still be able to fix up and get a rookie and get onto someone like a Cooper Simpson on the bubble this week. I think that's a fantastic way to be able to play it. Jason Horne-Francis has the break even in, both DT and in SuperCoach as well that's spiked up with the price cash drop that's already come. And I think if his price comes down in those 2 formats, people will be looking to jump onto. So if I'm trading one out of the 2 in DT, it's Macrae. And I'm going to mirror that sentiment in SuperCoach as well. I actually think there's really a world where trading out of Macrae this week is the right thing to do in SuperCoach. There's a lot of concerns for people about how long it'll take these 2 players to recover from. Now, both listed at 2 to 3 weeks for Macrae and 3 to 4 weeks for Jason Horne-Francis. It was interesting that the early commentary that came out for both was on the lower side for how long that they were expected to miss. I think Jason Horne-Francis has done soft tissue before, knows his body. I think they're actually more likely to get him back first. And I think that there's just a lot of concerns that I have around Macrae. And in SuperCoach, I think that Jason Horne-Francis is just the more natural scorer. We've had the same issues with Macrae scoring in AFL Fantasy. In SuperCoach, I mean, you look at his last 7, we go, 100? Sorry, not 100. We go 70 against GWS, 104 against the Dogs, 77 against Brisbane, 160 against Freo, again, the massive AFL Fantasy game as well, 79 against Carlton, 77 against West Coast. I think we just have to have the conversation and say, is Macrae really a top 6 forward? And to my mind, I think in SuperCoach, the answer is more on the no side than it was in AFL Fantasy.
I think what you can also do is then let your buy structure inform that decision as well. Round 13 is considerably easier to navigate than round 12. And so we were going to be without the Hornet next week anyway. Macrae's the extra obstacle of this week and next. Round 13, while tricky, if you're not conscious and you've just gone full Saints, full Freo, it should be the week that it's easier to navigate 20 on-field options and at least a dozen, if not 15 of them being near the premium performing players that you've got in your side. So I think alongside of thinking in that lens, I also go, Macrae, it's really been protected his scoring by one great week. it's unknown. And maybe it's just the football understanding in the community. We understand hamstring injuries and recovery a little bit more than we do the internal injuries sometimes from a footballer, a fantasy footballer watching. So we feel a little bit easy, go, I'd have confidence in that. Oh, internal. And even though it's different, we start thinking Christian Petrarca and go into these horrific places. Again, they're very different in terms of the output, but that's that thing. So I'm with you. If I was to only trade one, I would trade across the formats, Macrae. I'm happy to do that. I'm very comfortable to trade out both, but it depends on what your objectives are. How many trades have you got left? How many trades to premium upgrades do you need to make? What does your bench hygiene look like? That's where you start going through that checklist to make the decision.
How many boosts do you have left as well?
Yeah, is Macrae would be the one for me as well.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating how much this will diverge paths across the formats and across teams at higher ranks, because I think both are extremely popular towards the top across all of the formats. And I think that, you know, we keep talking about separation. This is a way to get separation. Like, because I think the narrative that we will see along online is that Macrae is the proven scorer. Macrae is the guy that can go 120 for the rest of the season, but I just don't think he's that guy anymore. And I think that if you can get off of him, it could be a massive separator for you against the rest of the pack, especially in limited trade formats, if you're wanting to really take the punt and go against what the pack will do.
I haven't said it out loud, and it's going to sound horribly hindsighty, but a few weeks ago I joined DT Lemon on his Patreon podcast, and we talked about pre-planning for the buys. This is a few weeks ago. And it was about how over the 8-week period of it takes to through the buys and pre-buys, it was who are the guys I want to bring in and who are the guys I plan to move out. It sounds terribly easy to say it now, but Macrae for me, it was at that time was a genuine AFL fantasy trade out at his round 13 buy, because I was like, I wanted a way to get into a Bontempelli and a Butters. And I was looking at that scoring going, there's only been 1 week in that last month to that point in time. It's expanded since that. It's like, this is where you want to create divergence and separation. And a player like a Nick Martin was so lowly owned at the time. Now we're going to see Nick's ownership spike, I think upwards of 10% this week, because we need to trade a premium forward. We need someone that's got flexibility. He gives us that, and he's got a great matchup, and it's relatively affordable via Macrae.
And it's a hard week to pick a vice captain.
Oh, is it ever? So
and
again,
Nick Martin on a
there you go.
It's just it's an easy week if you can VC Nick Martin on the Friday night. Like I think he's very much up there. But I digress. Let's continue on.
Yeah, no, it's more. This is where, depending on where you are in the season, your mentality of how to trade starts to shape a little bit. If you're in that top 100 or so, you start to look at who are the players that are unique against me that I need to start protecting against. I'm not a huge fan of pre-buy protective trades, but certainly through and after I am. If you're in the hunting pack, who are the guys that, based on fixture, role change, variance, is going to create divergent opportunities to get ahead? And then there's those that are just, you're in Hail Mary territory of, if I can have a great mid-season buy, if I can get aggressive, if I can nail 1 or 2 and get some luck, I could still be in this. So there's 3 kind of interesting trades that we'll see over this next 6 weeks. Those protecting their spot, those that are close and are trying to chip away, and those that are going all chips in, going, I'm either going to finish top 100 or I'm going to finish 10,000 because of the type of aggressive nature of trades that I make. And I love this time of year. This is the fun time, because you'll see different coaches' mindsets, mentalities, ideologies. This is where we do really find out who's been wearing trunks where they're swimming, not just in bench hygiene, but in doing their due diligence around trades, upgrade cadence, who they're looking to. What this is the time, this next 6 weeks, where we really see it all come out.
Absolutely, it is. And we've got 2 trades this week across the formats, unless you got a boost in DT and SuperCoach. You got 3 trades next week, and then we're into best 18, and we can try and hide behind that. But if it keeps going the way it's going, we won't be hiding behind it by the time we get out the end of the buys. So let's talk about the next big topic that we've got here. And I'm going to lead this one. We've got cash generation issues all the way across everywhere. Players are stalling out in cash. Xavier Lindsay's stalling out in AFL Fantasy and DT. Riley Bice is stalling out everywhere. Elijah Hewitt's stalling out. What are we going to do? Like, how are we going to continue to get these cash generators? Because the only reasonable rookie, like we had people trading into Sardell Hooley last week who looked good in the first half and then get subbed at halftime, and the cash generation is just immediately stopped. We had someone like a Hustwaite who was 2 weeks ago looking fine on an okay score at halftime, subbed out, dropped. How are we going to actually get towards 20, 21, 22 premiums in our teams with how it's looking? Can you help me, MJ? Can you help me figure out where I'm going to get to my 22 premiums?
Yeah, I can.
Can you give me a loan?
No, I need every cent I've got to be able to get through there. I think it comes back to that really interesting point you made right at the top of this podcast about this is a unique season, and every season does have its uniquenesses, but I've been playing fantasy footy for over a decade. This is one of the more challenging mid-season junctions of the year where teams are at a higher accelerated expectation of what they think their completed team should look like at this point of the year compared to 5 or even 10 years ago. And we just don't have the outlet options to get there. I'm happy to actually be a little bit patient here. And in a dream team and in a super coach perspective, I'm happy to not force something, because what's worse than waiting an extra week or two, because we're about to get the mid-season draft. We're about to get a whole new bunch of guys that are coming into teams that are needing some assets. Like you think of an Essendon's ruck stocks, desperately needing that. You can see a Bulldogs needing to bring in a small forward with a Cody Waitman. Like Riley West has been great, but is there a VFL or a Sandford or a Waffle small forward that could come in and add some class and some polish and support through there? So we've got this unknown variable that's about to land for us that could give us the Jai Newcomb types that we've seen come through there. I know that feels like delayed gratification and hopeful kicking the can down the road. But for me, I would much rather in Dream Team and Supercoach wait a week or two to really see and know, rather than force something this week and get an incarnation 2.0 of Hustwaite, of Boxshall, and be stuck and then going, well, now there's no money to generate here. And all I'm then doing with my very finite number of trades is scraping $50,000, which politely does nothing for you in those formats. And the value of a trade to me is much greater than that. So I'm actually quite comfortable in Supercoach and Dream Team, outside of getting creative, which I'm sure you've got some thoughts on. On the traditional downgrade in Dream Team and Supercoach, I'm happy to wait an extra week or two and just keep playing that Lindsay for the extra week. Hope that the Bice could recapture the 80, and if I lose 30k, so be it, but I'm not using a trade to only hopefully make 50k. So I'm comfortable in those two formats to just show a little bit of patience, get a little bit more information, see what lands, and then if I need to attack through the buys, I can. I know it might stunt the upgrade cadence through the buys, but I'm happy to give myself another week or two of information. What's your thoughts on that? And also AFL Fantasy, how to handle the hit the wall rooks that we've got?
I think that's 100% the right way to handle it. And I always have been that you need to stay with the upgrade cadence, you need to stay with the pack, you need to get an upgrade each week. I don't remember the last time I did a proper upgrade in AFL Fantasy this year. Not a proper traditional one down, one up. It might have been 5 weeks ago. But we just have to figure out a way to actually be fun with it. And I talked about it with Kitty Coleman before, and I think that he presents that opportunity not just in AFL Fantasy, but probably across the formats as well with his relative price tag. And, I'm going to jump around what we had in the show notes a little bit as well. I think that Callum Mills also fits into the exact same category. I think for as poor as he actually looked on the weekend, I think Matthias Philippou also feels into the same category as well. I think that there's genuine reasons why you just say, I know that these players are best 22 in their teams when they are fit. I know that at some point they will pop a score that will accelerate their cash generation. They will find their form and they will be a player that will just continue to tick away. And if I'm looping between a Matthias Philippou and be it a Levi Ashcroft or a Cooper Simpson, or you can play around with the DPP a little bit and put a loop with the Xavier Lindsay or something like that. If I'm having the loop between a couple of them for, the first 3 weeks coming out of the buys at my 22nd spot in my team, I'm probably okay with that because there will be teams that will have red dots at 6 out of the 8 positions on their bench, and that will just not be able to ever get that 20-second premium on their field. And they might be looping between players that are in and out of green vest and red vest every particular week. So for me, it's wait, but also consider all of the options that are available to you in terms of best 22 players, players that can significantly outperform their price tag, and players that will actually just be able to find a pop score every now and then to be able to keep you ticking along.
Well, a Coleman to a Bice downgrade in AFL Fantasy makes you over 100K. So that doesn't sound like a lot in AFL Fantasy, but as we do look to be with AFL Fantasy giving us an additional trade, the ability to just get that extra week ahead is going to help us to be able to, in a few weeks, going, okay, is it worth moving on the Lewis Hayes types? Look, it's probably not. I know some teams are still rocking a Connor Stone and an Archer Reed. They're red dots with a bit of cash. I'm okay to move if I had to through there. I'd much rather do that creative trade that you talked about of going 100K there, 50K there in AFL Fantasy, different in SuperCoach where you've got finite. But I'm with you in AFL Fantasy to just go a little bit of fat there, a little bit of fat there. It will maybe be an upgrade cadence week behind where I was 12 months ago, but 12 months ago, you didn't have the challenges that you do now. And so don't compare and contrast a prior season's upgrade ideology to a new season. Play the cards you dealt, not play the cards that won it for you last year. That's one of the biggest fallings for coaches is they don't play the reality of the now. They play the history and they end up tripping themselves over. How much, I know we've talked about Kitty and Callum, maybe we could stay while we're with them. What role do they play in our sides? Specifically, we've seen Kitty got a 70 odd last week. Callum, at time of recording, it's not being confirmed, but you'd think taking him off at halftime would give some level of confidence. They just wanted to blow the cobwebs out a little bit, and we probably see him this week, would be my estimate. Maybe one more, sure. But what role do these two play in our teams? Because they've got favourable roles in their teams, really nice price points, and in Coleman's case especially, a very helpful buy structure for us as well. What role do these two guys play for us? They were preseason popular picks. We've now got them. I think these two could be maybe two of the biggest saviors of our year if we get lucky.
Can I call them glorified broad bets?
Please.
That's really what they are. They are such value options for what they can do to your team. Like you just talked about, a Riley Bice to a Kitty Coleman makes 100K in AFL Fantasy this week. Next week, it'll make about 100K in SuperCoach as well, because he's coming in at, a 2 in front of his name in SuperCoach. He's coming in at 269. When we think about our starting rookies that we considered, Sullivan, who has rotted away across the formats in terms of his scoring, came in at 210 thereabouts in SuperCoach. So you're paying 60K more for a guy who's got a good role in a good team and is a good player, and the only thing that's kept him out is injury. Like, these are the types of players that can make that 150K, that elusive 150K figure we always talk about in SuperCoach, and 250K in AFL Fantasy without having to pop a massive score and have the potential to be able to pop a massive score in a favorable matchup. Like, we look at Brisbane, we thought that the loser out of that back line with Kitty coming back was going to be Zorko. It actually was Jasper Fletcher. They moved him back up onto the wing to be able to build the space for Coleman to be able to play on that half-back flank. So clearly, that's what they wanted. Callum Mills came back in via the VFL. He played half a game. He played CBA midfield for them in that game, played very well by all the accounts of people who were watching the game. And they took him off at halftime because they said, yep, half's enough to see what he's done. We just need to see how your fitness is. If he comes back in this week, it's against Melbourne. Melbourne are looking pretty good at the moment, so we'll get a pretty good litmus test of how he looks. I think that coming into round 12, when we've got our 3 trades available to us, when we've got the ability to be able to just move off players like a Jason Horne-Francis, who you talked about, who might be a buy ship, off players like a Jack Macrae, because you might have just not been able to get rid of him this week and you might get rid of him next week, off of other rookies that might be maxing out in cash, and it might only be 50 to 100K to these sorts of players. Like, this is the perfect time for them to pop their heads up. Gives us that time that you were just talking about to look for these mid-season draftees that will come through. And it gives us time to avoid these really bad-smelling 230K or 99K price rookies across the formats where they're just going to rot. Whereas if you can get someone that's not going to rot, whose best 22 is going to generate cash, man, these are fantastic. And I know that he didn't look as good on the weekend, and I know that there were a lot of people that traded into him early, myself included, but Matthias Philippou is also in that conversation.
Yeah,
like he had about 60% of the CBAs in the first half. They moved him out because something wasn't working in there. Now Jack Macrae is missing. He missed a lot of that third quarter because he had his bench sit. He came back on. He got involved and dislocated his finger and had to get that struck up, and basically only played about 20% TOG in that third quarter. I genuinely think that he's another one that we really need to consider, because if you look at it, trading Macrae down to Matthias Philippou this week in AFL Fantasy makes you 300K. And 300K on top of a dead rookie like a Lewis Hayes, who some might have, or even on top of someone like a Connor Stone, that gets you to a Kitty Coleman this week with cash to spare. You're fixing 2 red dots and getting 2 green dots. You're getting 2 players that have got best 22 spots in their teams. I cannot emphasize this enough. That is going to be gold when we're trying to count green dots through the buys, and when teams might be rocking out 19 or 20 players as opposed to the 22 that we want to be rolling out during the buys.
Yeah. Can I ask about the buys? We'll spend a lot more time on next week. I think is a really interesting week to look at our buy structures. But I'm curious, even for the most experienced of coach, we get a week that we've been dealt like a Horne-Francis and a Macrae, and we can kind of put the blinkers on a little bit and do one of 2 things. Look at those creative outlets that you've mentioned of, again, using an illustrative point, Macrae down to Philippou, Hayes up to Coleman, red dots fixed, on we go. That might be good for your buy structure. It might not be, but we're just thinking fixing my team. And then we got the other side of Macrae and Horne-Francis. We go, I'm just going to get the best guys I can get. Oh, Bont's unbelievable at the moment. I've got to get him. Dacos, if I don't get him now, it's after the buy and it's way too late based on what I'd planned in the year, or whatever the narrative we're telling ourselves. What is something we should be doing this week, even for the most experienced of coach, that more often than not probably goes, yeah, I know this, that's just helpful reminders for how we should be handling the incoming buys, because this is our last chance, really. 3 trades in AFL Fantasy next week, upwards of 4 in SuperCoach and Dream Team, should we have a boost available to us. It's really this critical week. If we're going to make any changes to structural navigations of the buy, this is our last chance to make that move.
Yeah, just pure and simple. Count the guaranteed green dots. The guaranteed ones. So Christian Moraes, he's not a guaranteed green dot. Connor Stone is not a guaranteed green dot. Caden Cleary is probably not a guaranteed green dot either. Riley Bice might not even be a guaranteed green dot. I think it's fair to say that of the rookies that are probably left floating around in majority of people's teams, not all, but majority, I'd say a Levi Ashcroft is a guaranteed green dot. I'd say that Zach Reed is a guaranteed green dot. I'd say that Luke Traynor is probably a guaranteed green dot, but he's vestable.
Davidson, probably
and
in there.
I'd say that Davidson's a guaranteed green dot. I'd say that Harvey Langford and Xavier Lindsay are probably guaranteed green dots.
Kako.
But, trading into Kako is maybe a guaranteed green dot. But
a good scorer, but guaranteed.
After that, and this is the thing, if you've got your premiums, you've got the ones missing on the buy, and you've got half a dozen rookies that might be green dots, that might not be, you need to factor that in when you're looking at it, because realistically, there could be a week where half of them just get dropped and you just don't have that score. And all of a sudden, instead of being on the, I've got 15 premiums and I've got 5 rookies, I've got 20 scores, I can drop 2 rookie scores, I'm all good. Suddenly you're at 15 premiums and 2 rookies, and all of a sudden you're having to force a trade to a player that you might not want in order to avoid copying a donut. So do that. Look at the premium players. Try to get an even spread. Try to get an even spread with your rookies if you can as well, especially the ones that are guaranteed. I think a Zach Reed one is the perfect example of a player that you are very happy, comfortable fielding. You know he's going to be there every week just because of the way that he's played and also how depleted Essendon are. And do the count, you know. If you can just get to 20 each week and it's 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, I think that that's going to be pretty comparable to how the rest of the competition is looking, because I've seen some state of some benches across formats, and I look at my own teams as well and see the state of my benches, and I'm thinking, this is going to get dicey. This is going to be a really interesting period.
I think that maybe this last thing I want to ask you before we wrap up this podcast is around our bench health and our bench hygiene. Hayes is the unlucky one, probably more for AFL Fantasy than anything else, with injury. So you put him, you could put a Sardell Hawley into the mix while potentially playing, could be a vest at any time, let alone not playing. Hugh Boxall in AFL Fantasy sits in that, and Angus Hastie sits in that. I'm still seeing a lot of Lucas Camporelli sitting in teams. Unfortunately, it does seem like Harry Boyd is a complete red dot, which again, having some is handy, having a lot is not. I wouldn't be surprised if Connor Stone comes back this week. I didn't think Fonte looked great, so I think that might save him, but I wouldn't be putting a whole heap of confidence into that. It's not looking pretty. So you throw the lack of genuine cash cow on the bubble in Supercoach and Dream Team ready to go, like it's Sims and Simpson this week. And I think they're as good as it gets, and maybe as good as it gets until some mid-season buys or teams just play the kids in the last 8 to 10 weeks of the year. Are we about to see not only teams that have planned, prepared, and structured well, are we about to, even in best 18, see a couple of teams that are only getting 16 and 17 on field? Because all it takes is a week like the one we've just copped of the Macrae, Horne-Francis, Callaghan type injuries. And not only is our upgrade cadence screwed, but the ability to get some bench hygiene is there. So I guess my question is what do we do with our benches this week and these next couple of weeks? Because, oh my gosh, it's looking a little sparse in some teams, and potentially in yours as you're watching and listening. I'm talking about your team. How do we fix it, but not kill the opportunity of scoring on field? Because that does feel like the sacrifice to be able to fix it up. It means we've got to blow up the upgrade cadence.
Yeah, it does. Like, it might be, we go back to that conversation we had at the start, it might be that you just fix rookies a little bit. You know, this would be the perfect week to fix rookies, the week out from buys, but all of a sudden we have Jason Horne-Francis and Jack Macrae that are both injured. But if you can survive this week and get 22 or 23 scores out whilst maybe holding one of them, and or potentially, you know, just fixing some rookies instead, it might be the week to do that. You know, there's red dots that we've talked about that if they've got a bit of cash on their head, might be worthwhile just scraping that 50 to 100K off in Supercoach and that 150K off in AFL Fantasy. Like, I don't think a Camporelli is coming back anytime soon. That's 100K you can scrape off of him, or 50K in sideways into a Cooper Simpson. It could be a way to do it, just to give you the option of having an extra number. Or you could start to get creative and, you know, eye the targets that are going to be dirt cheap through the buys. I mean, I think we talked about it last week with someone like a, oh gosh, how am I blanking on his name? Blondie, Kai Lohman at Brisbane. He's dirt cheap. He's so cheap, man. Like in Supercoach, I had a mate of mine who messaged me and said in Supercoach last year, he got to mid 400Ks when he went on a run of good form. He is 240K with a break even of 79 against Hawthorn this week. Like, there's a genuine world where he is the perfect buy flip, because what do you know? He plays on the round 16 buy this year. Like, it's the timing for him is just so fantastic. But this is the ways that we can sort of actually fix up our benches without really destroying our upgrade credits. And it might just be that we just have to wait that extra week so that we have those 3 trades available to us across the formats, and we can really get aggressive and just cull rookies and try and get 3 of them done and get to maybe a medium upgrade and a couple of players that can generate a bit more for us. But look at like your buy numbers, as I talked about before. Look about the players that you can have. Try to trade into players that are genuine best 22 if they're not at that basement type price, like a Sims and like a Simpson are, and identify the value players as premiums as well, so that you can potentially get that 100 to 150 to 200k or whatever it is to be able to afford the next player along the line.
Yeah, it's some good advice. And again, here on the channel, our AFL Fantasy top trade targets have been out on a Wednesday. We'll do our SuperCoach version for you as well. And then if you're part of our Patreon, the good news is not only do you get a round-based Q&A, you can also just reach out, send us a DM, let us see your side. We can actually coach you through what you could be doing, how to build that plan for your team over the next 5 weeks. And that's one of the benefits of jumping in at the Patreon, is that extra access that you get to the coaches panel, not just listen to a podcast or watch a video and go, oh yeah, okay, now how do I do it? If you're not sure, become a part of our Patreon, sign up. It's only a few dollars a month, right up to $10 is the highest tier. Not only do you get an extra content access from us, but also it's the chance to be able to reach out and go, hey, I'm kind of stuck. Would you help me? And not only do we jump in and do it, but other members of the Patreon, they get around you, go, have you thought about this? Could you do this? It's a great little community that's not so little. So if you want to jump in there and get involved, we would love for you to do that. All the details to become part of our Patreon, to be able to get that extra bit of help, is inside the link of this episode. Hey, Minnie, always a pleasure talking about fantasy footy with you. We wish you luck for this upcoming week, and we can't wait to chat with you again next week when the mid-season buys drop.
3 trades, bring it on.
Or 4. I'm just thinking I'll hold on to my last SuperCoach boost just so I can do a 4 trader, for no other reason than just to force that screenshot to be that little bit wider. There's no greater feeling than a 4 trade flex, even if it's a useless one. I'm just tempted to do it. Join me.
I've done one before. I did one in DT last year. It was good fun.
It's a good feeling. All right, there you go. Hey, also, don't forget, at the end of this week, the next batch of dual position players land. Who's going to get it? On Thursday, late afternoon, Australian Eastern Time, I'm going to drop a video with my predictions of who's going to pick up DPP. So lots of stuff happening, especially on our YouTube channel. Make sure you go and check that out. Subscribe and make sure you like the videos. Give us a comment while you're there. And if you're listening to this as an audio podcast and you haven't subscribed or given us a 5-star rating, we would so greatly appreciate if you could do that. Hey, good luck this week, for I know a lot of coaches, it's a challenging week, but the good news is where the chaos lands, it creates opportunities. And if you are prepared to just take a little bit of a risk, it might just be the move that gets you ahead of the pack. So don't see the pain, see the potential that this could get for you. Quick, someone tweet that back to me. That was better than I realized. Good luck this week. We hope you have a fantastic week of fantasy footy. That VC nails, your rookie roulettes, if you've got any left, are favorable to you. And we can't wait to be talking with you again real soon from the Coaches Panel.